All right, good morning. This is Better Each Day, and we're going to go ahead and get started with our program. I guess I should go ahead and click this over here so we can actually see this. I'll go ahead and start my share. Here we go. Glad to have you part of us, part of our group today, and thank you for being here. I know it's Saturday morning, and you're like, Steve, there's lots of things going on in my life. It's busy. Yes, I know that. I am also busy. And the key thing that we have to do to become better each day is we have to prioritize. And priority means about focusing on becoming a better world. And you're like, Steve, that's a big mission. That is a big goal. And the answer is, sure, why not? Why should we not all each focus on making a better world? It's not about having to change everything in the world. That's like trying to move a mountain. And if anyone knows the secret to moving a mountain, it is not about trying to go pick the mountain up and move it. It is about getting a spoon, or maybe a spade, or maybe even a shovel, and then eventually maybe you move up to a wheelbarrow, and if you're lucky, you might get a bulldozer one day. But the most important thing you can do is start moving it with something as simple as just a spoonful. So becoming better each day is about taking that spoonful, about making that change that will be significant by doing the small actions that focus on our thinking, focus on our attitude, that focuses on our external actions. Those actions repeated become our habits repeated become our personality, our character, and our character ultimately determines who and how we're going to deal with this thing called life. How are we going to respond as opposed to react? So one of the things I'm going to share here with you today is we're going to jump in real quickly, and I want to show you this one. Let me back up here. I'm going to change the share. Randy, great to have you here, my friend. Good to see you here. I'm going to share this screen with you real quick. I got to set up the sound share and optimize. And so we're going to listen to, this is the Genius Network, and I'm going to let him introduce Sean Acor, and you're going to get to hear about 12 minutes here, so hang out with me.
Thank you, Brenda.
Thank you, Joe, for having me here. I have to say that this is an absolute honor. Can you hear me in the back? I'm so thrilled to be here. This is fantastic. When I first got into doing this work, actually when I first went off to college to start collecting debts, my father was buoyed by the idea that someday I might come back and I might be a doctor or a lawyer or a banker, something he thought would make sense. And when I came home from college and told him, Dad, I want to study the science of happiness, he sat me down. My father is a neuroscientist at Baylor University down in Waco, Texas, and he told me that the average scientific paper, the average scientific journal article is only read on average by 7 people total, which is incredibly depressing for a researcher to hear. Because I know that that statistic also includes my mom, so I have to be honest, I could be thrilled about this research we're doing in this new field called positive psychology, where we found that we can actually raise your levels of happiness above your genetic set point, and doing so, turn on the human brain to its highest possible level, raising every single business and educational outcome and many of our health outcomes, and wirelessly tipping entire cultures, entire teams towards the idea that happiness is a choice and that happiness is possible. The only problem is you're so busy with your work, you're so busy with your families, that you probably don't take time every morning to read through the top-tier scientific journal articles to find out how you're supposed to be happier at work that day. So this gap starts to exist between what we've been studying and what we've been learning in this field, and what I wanted to do is to merge these two things together. I spent 12 years at Harvard studying positive psychology, and while I was there, I realized that a lot of this work that we were doing in the laboratory was flawed, because if you study happiness in a laboratory where we can control all the variables, that's not how happiness works out in the real world. If you can control the variables, that looks nothing what life looks like. So in the midst of, at the beginning of the economic downturn, I started to go out and share this research out with the world. In fact, my very first talk was at a very large Swiss bank, and the introduction was not nearly as kind as Joe's introduction. They said, well, we don't have bonuses for everyone, but here's a talk on happiness from a guy from America. But you can imagine the response, and with Swiss bankers. But what's amazing is, as I started doing this research and we started to battle test these ideas, we realized that this research I'm about to get to share with you is so much more powerful when you cannot control all the variables. And it turns out that we had that happiness success formula backwards, and we actually were able to solve two cultural myths that were holding us back within our society. But as soon as we start talking about happiness, everyone gets the wrong idea. I started all this work actually at the Divinity School. I fell backwards into doing this. I was studying Christian ethics at Harvard Divinity School and comparing it to Buddhist ethics, looking at how our beliefs change our actions in the world. And while I was doing this, some people in the psychology department said we can test those same ideas, but we can also at the same time quantify if somebody's becoming more compassionate or somebody's becoming happier or more optimistic. And I got hooked. But one of the things I imported from the Divinity School was the definition of happiness from the ancient Greeks. The modern world, we'd find happiness as pleasure, which is very short-lived and then it's over, which is not worth us spending even 10 minutes talking about here today. What I want to talk about is what the ancient Greeks defined it as. They defined happiness as the joy you feel moving towards your potential. I want to stop momentarily because that definition actually changes the pursuit of happiness for the people here in this room. Joy that moves us towards our potential. Joy is something we can feel even when life is not pleasurable. As you just as you were hearing earlier today, as Dave was talking about, he was talking about these ideas about how sometimes as we're trying to reinvent our life, it can sometimes feel miserable. I don't think it necessarily has to feel miserable, but we won't feel high pleasure throughout the entire process. Joy is something you can experience even when life is not pleasurable. Even working 18 hours trying to build a business, you might not have high pleasure, but you can have high joy in the midst of it. Going on a long run for 10 miles, your legs could be burning, but you can still be feeling high joy. Same thing in the midst of childbirth. But we're terrified of happiness as a society, especially among the entrepreneurial class, because we think if I'm happy now, then I'm going to become complacent. If I'm happy now, I'm not going to push as hard. If I'm happy, I won't nearly have been as successful as I am right now. That's what pleasure does. Joy does the exact opposite. Joy actually fuels us to see our potential. It makes us want to explore the world as much as possible. It makes us want to invest as deeply as possible in the people around us. So I got this call, though, from the Harvard Business Review a little over a year ago, and they said, Sean, we've been following this research you've been doing that I've been working out at these companies, trying to show them how if they focus on happiness, it actually can triple their levels of profits and raise their levels of productivity and sales and all of those things. They said, we're going to put it on the cover of the magazine, which I was thrilled about, right? People work 8 to 14 hours a day. Find some way of getting them positive there. Think what will happen to our communities. But I said, let's talk about something serious here. Let's talk about something that's bending the tracks of human potential. Whatever you do on the cover of the magazine, don't put like a big yellow smiley face or something silly. And they said, Sean, we're the Harvard Business Review. We would never do something like that. I got the cover of the Harvard Business Review in January and February of last year, which many of you probably read. And I looked at it, and there was a big yellow smiley face on the cover of the magazine. Of course, with $ dimples, it's HBR. But I looked at the smiley face, and I realized this is exactly the problem. Because look, the smiley face has no eyes. It's blind happiness. It's exactly the problem. Because as soon as we start talking about happiness, we think we have to be blind to the suffering we see people experiencing in this world. We have to be blind to the fact that we're caring for aging parents or for sick children. Blind to the fact that our lives might not have ended up like we expected them to. But it turns out if you research it, ignorance leads directly away from bliss. What I want to talk about is the exact opposite. Last year, I got the privilege to go out and speak to a group of CEOs of top software companies, all software companies that are leading this technological revolution we're living through. And afterwards, one of the CEOs of the top companies offered to drive me to the airport to talk about how we could cascade this research out throughout his entire company using these digital interventions, which I was so excited about. That's how you scale this information. So I got into this guy's really nice sports car, put on my seatbelt. He got on the other side, immediately started talking to me about how they've been growing so quickly, their stress levels have been rising. And while he was speeding towards the airport, that little bell was going off in his car, the seatbelt bell, and eventually it stopped going off. It got tired. And I turned to him, I said, you don't wear seatbelts? He said, no, Sean, I listened to your talk. I love your research. I'm an optimist. I was like, oh, no. No, you're an idiot. But I'd love to work with you. Optimism. Optimism is great for a lot of things, but it doesn't stop cars from hitting us. It doesn't stop reality from impinging upon us. That's irrational optimism. If we sugarcoat the present, we make poor decisions for the future. What I want to talk about exactly exemplifies why you've come here. It's rational optimism. Rational optimism starts with realism, but you maintain the belief that your behavior matters if linked to the right people. Rational optimism starts with realism, but maintains the belief that your behavior matters if linked to the right people. The reason that's important is it allows you to see the problems you need to fix and also not sugarcoat the world. But at the same time, as you see those problems, you don't think that they're permanent and pervasive, they're fixable. When you do that, people not only start believing in your vision, they actually start believing in your leadership as well, and that's what causes these long-term changes to actually happen. So that's what we've been doing in positive psychology. What we've been doing is we've been studying these people called positive outliers, people that are above the curve for some reason. Because if you think about it, we normally study the average. We find out how many pills the average person should take if they get a headache. But already you should see a problem, regardless if you're 90 pounds or 290 pounds, back of the bottle still says 2 pills. That's impossible. We metabolize in completely different ways. And if we keep studying what's average, this society, this world will remain merely average. Instead of deleting those positive outliers, we study them. Everyone in this room is a positive outlier. That's why you're at the Genius event. We would have deleted you in the past. Now we realize we have to study you, because only by studying you can we find ways not how to move people up to the average, but how we can move the entire average up in our companies and our schools worldwide. The reason why this is important, this is not the message our brains normally receive on a daily basis. If you try and find out what the world looks like in reality, you turn to your smartphone to find out what's going on in the world, and your brain is immediately bombarded by negative information. Murder and corruption and diseases and natural disasters, and very quickly your brain starts to think that's the accurate ratio of negative to positive. We can talk about happiness for 10 minutes here today, but let's get back to reality. Reality is mostly about suffering, and if you're not feeling it now, it's coming. We know it's a skewed ratio, but that's what our brains are experiencing. The way that I met Joe was actually in the back of Ariana Huffington's apartment, where I was doing this work with her on Thrive, and my wife, Michelle Geenan, and I just found out that if you watch 3 minutes of negative news in the morning compared to 3 minutes of still negative events, but with solution-focused news, turns out that if you watch the 3-minute negative news, 8 hours later, 6 to 8 hours later, if we ask you about your mood, you have a 27% likelihood of having a worse day than somebody who had not been exposed to that negative news. It turns out 3 minutes each morning, we're actually corrupting part of the way that our brains process the entirety of the rest of the day. What we've been finding is it changes us. It creates what we call the medical school syndrome, which if you know people who have been through medical training, during the first year of medical school, as you read through a list of all the symptoms and diseases that could happen to a human being, suddenly these brilliant and aspiring doctors start realizing they have all of those symptoms and diseases. They'll actually start manifesting symptoms they were studying for an exam. If you get bored during my last 2 minutes of my talk, you can just go on WebMD and just read through a list of all the symptoms and diseases that are online. It becomes like a checklist, like dead hands. That's what I was feeling while he was talking. But what happens is, if you do this, I have a brother-in-law named Bobo, which they didn't give me time here to talk about, but Bobo called me on the phone from Yale Medical School, which is our rival, and he said, Sean, I have leprosy, which even at Yale is extraordinarily rare. But I had no idea how to console poor Bobo because he'd just gone over a week of menopause. What we're finding is that it's not necessarily the reality that shapes us, the lens through which we view reality, which is why I got it. When I was at Harvard, I saw something amazing.
Okay, good stuff there. All right, thank you. I see a few other folks that have joined us today. Tony, good to see you this morning. So I want to get your feedback and jump here. Good to see you, Alan. Tell me what you got out of Sean. He speaks so fast. I know he's not from Texas. Even though his father says he's from Waco. I mean, I have been myself, people don't believe I'm from Texas. This guy talks really fast, so I have to listen faster than normal, okay, because he really packs all that information in there, and that's his normal speed, his normal rate of speech. So tell me, there was a lot of stuff here I was taking notes of. I've listened to this clip. It's a 12-minute total clip. We got through about 10 minutes of it. What jumped out at you and just said, this is the thing I haven't heard before? Maybe, Steve, you've had me listen to Sean before. Maybe I've read his article in Harvard Business Review. But today, what he said right there just jumped out at me. What did you learn? You'll take yourself off mute.
I just thought it was interesting to hear him say that if you catch a little bit of news that's negative first thing in the morning, because that's one of my arguments a lot of times is like, I don't want to watch the news.
Right.
Well, it does just make me depressed.
Right.
It's like, thank you for some verification of that.
There's the science behind what you were intuitively feeling, okay? I don't know anybody that watches the normal news and walks and skips out of the room going, I can't wait to get to the day. Do you know of anybody that does that? I don't think so. You have to think about what are the people that are behind the news stations. Where do they make money? They make money from sensationalizing the things that keeps people's eyeballs glued to their screen and their channel longer than normal, okay? So a lot of times at the very end of a 30-minute segment, they'll have a personal interest story. You know, the firefighter that came and got the kitten out of the tree from, the lady that thought her best friend was going to live up there and die for the rest of her life, okay? And everybody loves it. It's heartwarming, and yes, it does give you that little bit of up. But you've just had 28 minutes of horror, of everything that's going wrong: war, pestilence, earthquakes, inflation. Uh, come on, gas prices, all of these things, negotiations at political levels, and all of them doing what? Succeeding or failing? Mostly failing, okay? And of course, then we've all been through the pandemic for the last 2 years. How much did we all sit here glued to watching whether or not Fauci decided we were or were not supposed to wear masks today or this week, okay? And walking away from it going, does this guy even know what he's doing? So at the end of the day, what does that allow us? How does that allow us when we're supposed to be in control of our life? When we're in control, did you hear the definition that he gave, the Greek definition of happiness? It's totally different than our normal definition. I guess you would call it Americana, or let's just call it modern day, which happiness is, somehow connected to something that's pleasurable, right? But that's short-lived. It burns out fast, okay? And then we're back to what? Unhappiness, okay? Because the opposite of not having happiness is the absence of happiness, which is unhappiness. But what did the Greeks talk about? The Greeks had a different definition. It was joy that you feel moving towards what? Your potential. Now, when you sit there and watch 30 minutes of doom and gloom, do you feel like jumping up and moving toward your potential? No. So how can you possibly have that positive impact? Sean's an expert in positive psychology. How our world works. We talk about what we focus on. Remember, what's the name of the book right here? I've got one of my favorite ones. Where is it? Oh yeah, here it is. As a Man Thinketh by James Allen. Okay, and
Great book.
this is. I mean, look at it. It's one of the tiniest books I've ever have on my shelf, but most powerful. Okay, if you don't have As a Man Thinketh by James Allen, go grab it. You probably grab it down at the store or have Amazon send it to you tomorrow. What you think about is what you create in your world. We have this ability to manifest our reality. So what our creator gave us is the ability to create our own destiny. And that destiny could mean where are we going to be in 5 minutes from now, 5 hours from now, 5 days from now. And all those create together. If you listen to Darren Hardy, what you're doing right now, the small little actions do what? They compound over this thing called time. And we create what? We create our future outcome. So where we're at right now is because of our decisions, everything we've done up to this point. And where we're going to be in the future is a result of all the actions we're going to do right now moving forward. Does that make sense? So that means that you can change things. So, Alan, you got your hand up, buddy. What's up?
Well, I'm really glad that you started this off with that video. I've never seen it. I don't think I have, but it's that one I'm going to go back to. Another video that would really complement this very well is a movie. It's a documentary called Happy.
Okay.
A lot of the same stuff where accumulating things, it gives you just a really short moment of elation and it goes away. And so you need to buy another, ooh, shiny, and then the joy goes away. Whereas if you instead you try to reach that happiness or that joy by learning a new skill or contributing to other people, that's the kind of joy that stays with you. And when this pandemic first happened, I found myself trying to build my business on Facebook. And at first that was new and exciting, but eventually that just got old, that got dull, it got depressing, like watching the news.
Right.
About half a year ago, 4 months ago, I applied for a job at Lowe's because home improvement is one of my passions.
Sure.
You probably wouldn't think that you'd find someone working at Lowe's who's just thrilled, happy to be there, but that's what everyone notices about me working at Lowe's is I'm thrilled and happy to be there. And I was even told by one of my managers that since I've been there, everyone else seems to be in a better mood.
Sure. Yeah. And so it is contagious. Well, let's
It
put
totally
it this way.
makes a difference.
Yeah, but all of us are contagious. All of us have the ability to use our emotions to do what? To impact other people's perspectives. 100%. Yeah, Randy?
It's just building on what Alan was saying, happiness is a feeling that comes after actions we take.
Yep.
So when we look for ways to be kind to ourselves and to other people and look for ways to spread joy and happiness, and Alan, just by being cheerful at work, he is paving the way for other people to be cheerful. every little thing that we do, like Darren Hardy talked about,
Right.
It does compound. It does, I sit here thinking too, every little thing that we leave undone works the other way to drive us towards stress. Because unfortunately, I've experienced that. I think we all have to some degree. But the beautiful thing is we can turn that around and start making little adjustments, doing little actions that compound and do make a difference. Every little thing we do.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that, I think, is one of the biggest things when we talk about becoming better each day. That's why I started this whole concept off this morning with the idea about moving a mountain begins with a spoon. Okay. And that's, I think, that concept, when I got that once upon a time, it's the same thing. How do you eat an elephant? And you go, well, I can't eat an elephant. It's a big, huge, massive, I don't know, mini dinosaur. How am I supposed to eat an elephant? And that's the first concept. And our mind jumps to this deal. Oh my God, well, I couldn't possibly eat this big, whatever this, what do they call it? I used to know the name of it, but this big monster beast. Okay. Behemoth. Yeah, it's monster. Right. And the answer is you eat it with a spoon. Okay. You start off with the small bite sizes. Do you get to change down the road? Well, here's an interesting concept. We're going to talk about this in our other sessions today, because we do 3 sessions here. And so I'm going to share something with you. I'm going to share my screen again with you here just a second. Let's see if I can actually get this to animate from this current slide. Let's see if this will animate for me. Come on. Here we go. All right. So over time, this is what happens. Okay. This is what's called a hockey stick effect. All right. And Kaizen is the concept of continuous improvement. But look at this line down here. We don't know. This is what our endurance comes from. You need grit to continue this thing, because this continuum right here is called time. And of course, this is the idea here that we're going to share later on today, is about the 5 S's that come from the Kaizen concept, the Toyota way, and how do you continue to do these major 5 S's over time, over endurance, that create this level of success. But if we go backwards, this is what we're really focusing on, okay? Is this consistent, never-ending improvement, okay? And so when we think about this, how do we create this positive psychology in our lives? How do we become the Alan that's at Home Depot, that when customers are coming in, they see and feel a difference, that Alan actually loves being there? I mean, this guy, you can see, if you bring up an idea and you say home improvement to Alan, bingo, his expression changes, right? If I remember, Alan, wasn't this your skills, your handyman skills? Isn't this something that came down from your father? Did your father give you these?
Well, my dad taught me a lot about electrical wiring, but I fell into a career of carpentry, framing houses. We built one house, and I worked for a contractor that did and remodels. And one point I want to bring up, I follow the example of Dean Graziosi, because he hires people, he pays people to do the stuff that he sucks at, and he dives himself into the stuff that he is passionate about. So that might be kind of an answer of what you were getting at.
Yeah.
He plays to his strengths.
So go ahead. Say again, Randy.
He plays to his strengths.
Plays to his strengths and does those things that really, give you that wow. There's a lot of people, way back in my career, 30-something years ago, I was working in a risk management firm, and most of our clients were law firms downtown Dallas. So I was sitting there with a lot of young associates that had just come out of law school, many of them SMU law, that was just, right down, a couple miles from where they were now, had this prestigious job in a skyscraper downtown. And interestingly enough, I had many what I call in-depth conversations when we were talking about the risk management in their life and retirement planning and so forth. And I found that many of the individuals that had got this really great law degree from SMU didn't like what they were doing. In fact, they didn't just dislike it, they hated it. But they were stuck in this deal that either they or their parents had, invested. How much is an SMU law degree? I mean, it's a private university, it's very well known, It's expensive. I don't know, is it 200,000, 250,000, 350,000? I don't know how many hundreds of thousands it is to get a law degree from SMU, but they're caught in this trap now. They know they can't make a lateral movement. You can't go from being an attorney with a JD passing the bar and jump from, 150,000 as an associate for some big firm and make a lateral movement to someplace else. So what's now their problem is they've built a lifestyle, they've got a mortgage, maybe they've got one youngster in private school somewhere. What are they going to do? And so they now are stuck in this environment and they show up every day. And what do you think when they come walking down the hallway? Are they the poster boy or poster girl for positive psychology? Yes or no? No, absolutely not. And so you see a lot of people that get stuck in where they're at, whether their education sticks them there or it's them trying to hold a, what do you want to call it? Follow in a parent's path or do something that they think other people believe they should do, or maybe their own limiting belief is they believe this is the only thing that they're qualified to do. And what happens is they don't become better each day. They become worse. They dislike what they do. They dislike the people that they're around. They dislike the process that they're part of. And every day becomes this grueling, grudging type of treadmill. Now, how do we break this? Okay. All of us have things that we have to do in our life that aren't absolutely the best thing that we would want to do, right? Not everything about our daily activities, our routines are things that we enjoy doing. There are some things we have to do because it's part of the regimen, okay? Commuting. Not how many people love the commute? Not very many people. What can you do to alter it? Well, you can double up. You can use the commute to maybe add in, a YouTube training or something like that you can listen to or learn something while you're driving. That's an idea. Listening to the news while you're driving, probably not a good idea while you're on a 30-minute commute, because by the time you get to your destination, are you going to be in a better mood or in a worse mood? We know the answer to that. So you've got to start being conscious of moving the mountain each day, okay? Of eating the elephant. You get the spoon. And you've got to think about it is a conscious, you have to become conscious of your, quote, little choices that make big outcomes, because it is the consistent habits that are many times negatively impacting us that we can adjust those little habits every day and start creating our better version of ourselves. And it might only be a little bit, like I showed you the picture, the hockey stick effect. It becomes changing those little habits now and consistently repeating them, because here's the deal. We're going to do some kind of habit. We are. That's just what humans are about. We're about patterns. We get into a rut. A rut, greatest definition I ever heard of, is a grave with the two ends knocked out. You ever heard that before? A rut is a grave with the two ends knocked out. So when you find yourself stuck in a rut, then you have to get yourself out of that rut. That takes effort. It takes conscious effort. You have to decide, I want to become better. Then you have to decide, after wanting to become better, number two, you have to decide, well, how do I become better? What is the replacement habit that I'm going to replace this 3 minutes, not 30, 3 minutes of negative news impacts you at how much, he said? 8 hours later at 20-something% reduction in the value of what you're performing that day. Wow. So how do we change it? Well, what we're doing right now is one of those things. You showed up here to train, whether you're here live or you're watching this by replay. That means you want to make a difference in your life. Why? If you don't make a difference in your life first, how are you going to make a difference in other people's lives? You ever think about that? You have to feed yourself first before you can feed someone else. If you're on an airline and the plane starts going down, what do? When the mask pop down, you don't put it on someone else's face first. They tell you, put it on your face first. You have to create your own life support system. You have to become better each day. You have to change your regimen. You have to become in love with making the world a better place. And it begins with you. Start with a spoon. Start with your one action that you can do this next week. Alan, jump in here. And Randy, I know you got to go, my buddy. Thank you for being here, my friend. We'll see you later. Go ahead, Alan.
So some people seem to have the wrong idea that the best way to help the poor is to be poor yourself. Abraham Lincoln said the opposite. The best way to help the poor is to not be poor yourself. How you can help a poor person if you are also poor?
Right. Yeah, and the thing is you have to. It's all about the thinking pattern, and you have to understand that the thinking pattern many times has really good intent, but the outcome isn't quite thought through as well. So that's where it comes to going back to getting good counsel and hanging out with individuals that have experience and not just good book knowledge. Okay, book knowledge is necessary. It's a foundational, fundamental piece that you must have in every learning process. So I'm not discounting education or academic learning. I'm saying to make sure that once you have that basis, you need to stack all kinds of experience on it. Tony, I'm going to jump in here real quick before we finish this session, because you've been fighting fires for how many years?
29.
29 years. Okay. Now, when you went through the original training school, okay, how much different is your experience now with nearly 3 decades of fighting fires under your belt as opposed to what they teach you in the book?
Oh, significantly massive.
Massively different. So at the end of the day, if you come up with a very challenging fire, do you want the rookie that just came out of the book learning school that just passed the test? Or do you want Tony showing up with your 3 decades of experience on top of the book learning? We know the answer to that. Yeah, there's a big difference. There's a big outcome. And so the thing is we all have to understand that each of us have that experience. And if we don't have the experience, we start the process, then we have to go find those individuals that have the experience. And that's what's going to make the major difference. So let me do this real quick. I want to jump over here and grab the next session so that we can, let's see here. We've got to go to the next session of 2 today. I thank each one of you for being here. I'm going to drop this in the chat right now just in case you don't have it so that we can all make sure that I have the right one. And I'm going to do one other thing here too, because last week, one second here. Okay. Well, it's not letting me do this. I'm trying to grab one thing here real quickly because I want to make sure that I grab the next one. Okay. I'm going to make sure this is the correct link because last week when I put the link in here, Linda said that the link wasn't correct. So, Alan, have a great day and thanks for making a great impact. There's the link right there. And we'll make sure that those are the same link. I think they are, but I want to make sure that you're getting the right one. Yep, they look like the same link. Okay, so I'll see you in the next call in 60 seconds.